Good evening, everybody. For those that don't know me, my name is Manon Landry-Wallet. I work for Sport New Brunswick, and this evening's Podium Performance Series is taking place with not only Natasha McLaughlin-Chaisson, so it's an honor to have her with us. But first, I just want to do a quick landing acknowledgement. We're happy to be together this evening throughout Turtle Island. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered virtually across Turtle Island. I'm joining you from New Brunswick, the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy nations. The territory is unceded as the peace and friendship treaties signed in 1725 and 1726 did not surrender the lands. We're here to engage and learn in a safe environment. Plaisir d'y être ici ce soir avec vous à travers de l'île de la Tortue. Avant qu'on commence, je voulais premièrement prendre un moment pour reconnaître que nous sommes ensemble virtuellement sur les territoires non cédés et traditionnels des nations Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey et Passamaquoddy. Le territoire n'est pas cédé car les traités de paix et d'amitié signés avec la couronne britannique en 1725 et 1726 n'ont pas cédé les terres. Je vous invite à apprendre davantage sur les terres sur lesquelles nous sommes actuellement. Quick note, this evening session is in English. So for those, pour mes francophones dans la salle, for our francophones with us this evening, we will have a French session on February 24. So I will put the link at the end of tonight's session so you'll have an opportunity. And as well, this evening's session is recorded and will be broadcasted on the Canadian Sport Center, the Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic YouTube channel. So once that is available, it will be definitely shared with you from that perspective. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you my dear friend Natasha. So those of you may have heard Natasha speak in the past. She's a dietitian with the International Olympic Committee. She works with the Sea Dogs, the Wildcats, Université de Moncton. Did a really great resource for us when we're involved with the North American Indigenous Games about how to help build your coaching, I would say, in regards of fuel for performance as a high performer perspective. She also gave sessions to us as mission staff on how we could fuel ourselves to make sure we're the best that we could be, and as well created guides for our athletes. So I'm gonna high five it to Natasha. Without further ado, Natasha, I would say the Zoom is all yours. And thank you.
Thank you for having me, Manon. I appreciate the introduction, and I am happy to be here. So, bonsoir tout le monde. Welcome, Kwe. I want you to feel comfortable asking questions as you see fit throughout the session. So go ahead and write them in the chat box. If any questions come up, there will be a question period at the end as well. If some of you have a better time or you're already scheduled to participate today and you're more comfortable in French, you can write those questions down in French as well. Donc, vous pouvez poser vos questions en français. Y pueden preguntarme en español también si lo quieren. So let's get started. Today, I'm really looking forward to helping you as coaches. You're spending all your time taking care of others, eh? That's part of your personality, part of your I guess what you've signed up for as coaching. You're making sure that you are optimizing on your players' performance capacity, on your athletes' performance capacity. You're stretched thin whether that be with your family, maybe you work also alongside that the coaching and another side type of work, or maybe a full-time position on top of the coaching. And so my role today is to help you find the energy to be able to optimize your coaching ability, to be able to give the best of yourselves as coaches, and even to have some of it left for you at the end of the day so that you are not exhausted and so that you can be the best version of yourself. So we're going to start with a quick question that I'm going to ask. So feel free to grab whatever you have to write on, whether that be If you're on your phone, maybe you'll take your notes. If you're at home, if you can grab a paper and pen. This is a quick activity just to see what your knowledge base actually is when it comes to nutrition. Some of you, a lot of you have participated in many nutrition sessions in the past. Some of you may have not done so in a while. You may not be aware of what the nutrition implications would be for you as coaches because we're always looking at how to optimize nutrition for our athletes. And so I want you to write down 1 minute. I'll put the timer on. Everything you believe you should be doing. You might not be doing it, that's all right. But nutrition actions, which behaviors should you prioritize as a coach to optimize your cognitive performance and your sleep, of course? So, timer's on, and you've got 1 minute. Go ahead and start writing. We've got 10 seconds left. You won't be having to send this in, so don't you worry. All right. So drop your pencils, take a break, flip your sheet if you need to. We're going to come back to this later on, okay? This is a starting point. This is what you know as a baseline, and we're going to build on it. So the three topics we're going to touch on today are cognitive performance. So how to optimize your performance as a coach. We're going to troubleshoot. So if you are feeling certain ways, whether that be you're having a headache, you're feeling exhausted, fatigued, how do we work around that? How do we improve on it? How do we fix it? And of course, nutrition's association to improving sleep and your recovery as a coach. These are all controllable. This is something that I very much want you to remember. There's so many aspects of your life that you do not have control over. So it's very, very important that we focus on what we can have some control over. Okay. And it's not about taking full control, it's progress over perfection. If we try to aim for perfection with nutrition, we're going to have a very unhealthy relationship with food, and we're going to put a lot of effort in there that is not necessary. So it's about finding that balance. So we're going to start with a game. Now, generally, if we were in person, we'd maybe use an app and see questions and answers pop up. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you to write down your answers in the chat box. Okay. So, first thing that comes to mind, one answer, you go ahead and write it. Never leave home without what? Blank. So, you can write, it doesn't have to be food associated, it can be anything really. But if I were to say never leave home without, what would come to mind? I know I would say my keys. Done that before, unfortunately. Health card, I like it. Cell phone, yes, I've turned around for that. Snacks and water. Okay, sports bottle with your electrolyte drink. Coffee. So there's a good one too. Money. Yeah, that's pretty important. You don't want to be low on gas and realize you don't have a way to pay. So I very much enjoy these answers. One of the priorities that we do not want to leave home without is our water bottle. It does take some time to hydrate. Okay, so it can take quite a few hours to properly hydrate when we're dehydrated. And so we want to make sure that we are sipping away throughout the day at our liquid. Now, that could be coffee, it could be water. We don't want it to be majority coffee. Um, but it is important to have something to sip on. And this could be at home as well. So if we're having a hard time remembering it, there are certain little things that we can do to make it easier. I've had athletes tell me that they put a reminder on their phone so that the next day, either there's a reminder pop up at night for the next day or in the morning to prepare their water bottle. I've had some athletes tell me that they actually put their clean water bottles in their underwear drawer and they tell me that they don't forget their underwear. So that's a way to make sure you remember your water bottle as well. So that could be an option. Um, you could associate it, and that's why I like these other answers. If you're saying, "Oh, I have to have my money with me," then you want to make sure you've got your something to drink as well. Or you might say, "I if I've got my cell phone even in the house." Yeah, I know most of you are not in the house for a day at a time, probably with the coaching and, running around maybe with your families on top of it and other work and volunteering that you do. But if you can have your phone in one hand, I always say, or your pants on, then you've got something to drink, a water bottle with you as well. So if we can make those associations, that's a really good way to focus on our hydration. You will not absorb liquid optimally if you. So how could we finish this sentence? Go ahead and answer in the chat box. Not seeing any answers. You will not absorb liquid optimally if you. And if nobody's answering, I will start naming you from the crowd. So go ahead. Now we've got one answer. There we go. Very interesting. So a few of you answered actually if you're tired. So if you're tired, you'll still properly absorb liquid. You might forget to drink liquid if you're tired. So we want to make sure that we remember to have it. If you're too hydrated, definitely there will be a lot of uh, urine output. Your body will try to stabilize that, but it is possible to overhydrate for sure. If you forget the bottle, definitely. So if you're not drinking the liquids, if you're dehydrated, you will actually absorb it. Your body's wanting to help you absorb. Stress can affect if if it leads to something like loose stool, where you might lose more water or more liquid, I should say. Um, Realistically, if you're drinking too quickly, there's a reduced, you're not going to absorb the full amount. We absorb a certain amount of milliliters or ounces per minute. And so we want to make sure that we are taking sips regularly. So instead of saying, oh gosh, I forgot to drink, or I'm going to start my day off by drinking half a liter, guzzling it down, chugging. And that's part of, personality of athletes. And most of you are former athletes. And so some personality types tend to just chug that liquid down, get it done, the task is over, and I move on. The issue there becomes that you go to the washroom half an hour later, it's clear, you're proud of yourself. What actually happened was that you did not necessarily absorb all that water, okay, or all that liquid. So we want to be aware of that, we'll say. Now, what I also want to mention, we see here electrolytes. Very, very important that we know that the sodium helps absorb the water. Some of you may not want to consume too much sodium if we've got cases of high blood pressure, hypertension. There may be too much sodium, too much water being absorbed. You may be on medication for it. Again, if we're looking at the healthy coach that does not have high blood pressure, that's not on any of these medications for blood pressure, and that's maybe sweating a lot, practicing sport as well, then making sure that the salt is replaced when after sweating in order to properly absorb liquid makes a difference. Having carbohydrates also makes a difference. And I'm not seeing that here. I don't think I saw carbs. So carbs absorb, help absorb water into the body. So when we are going low carb, and some tend to do that, whether they're doing it on purpose or by accident, bread, pasta, rice, cereal, fruit, we do need a certain amount of it to properly absorb the liquid that we're drinking. Now, very good question here. Taking creatine. So creatine's side effect is that there is a bit of water retention, a few pounds. This can make a difference depending on which sports we have here. Maybe if you want to type in the sport that you coach, then I can have, for all of you, if you want to just type in your sport, I can better direct my session. But it is important that we remember that certain sports can benefit from creatine depending on the age, depending on the timing, depending on if it's certified and so on. The situation, are we trying to heal from a specific type of injury that can benefit from it? So there's a lot of different uh, situations and I guess items to consider. So I'd want you to take those into consideration. I wouldn't take creatine purely for the water weight gain that would come from it, or not for a hydration purpose per se. We would need to take it for another reason. So I'm seeing we've got some hockey, field hockey, figure skating. We've got a good array of different sports here. So this is absolutely beautiful. Archery, swimming, softball, curling. So welcome everyone. I will do my best to adapt this to you as coaches of these specific sports, okay? So, just so you understand, here we're talking about hydration, and you're probably wondering, okay, but what does it really do? Why is this hydration so important? I've always heard I've got to drink, you know, when I was a kid, it was 8 glasses of water a day, and the recommendations have always been there, but we always wonder why. So, if we're looking at even some of these studies that are not, not that recent, so this is very well known for a long time, but dehydration, so when you're losing a certain percentage of your hydrated body weight, you're losing weight on the scale because you are dehydrated. And this is very small percentages, okay? So we're looking at maybe forgetting to bring your water bottle to work, maybe going to pee and it's resembling apple juice. That could be a sign that you're already 1 or 2% dehydrated. So as you can see here, a 2.7% dehydration, reports of headaches, concentration and alertness being decreased. We can see here dizziness, fatigue, anxiety, tension. A lot of different research articles are showing the effects of dehydration on performance. There's studies, and yeah, I've listed them in the slide, the last slide. Sorry, my French is wanting to come out before my English. But dehydration of about 1 to 2% body weight will again increase fatigue and anxiety, or can, not necessarily will, but high probability. And it can reduce short-term memory, your ability for executive function, attention capacity, concentration, decision making, and ability for precision work. So in each of your sports, for you as coaches who have to multitask with a variety of different athletes who have different strengths, different weaknesses, different approaches that you're taking with each of these athletes, and you're needing to bring them to a state of increased performance while also trying to put all these pieces of the puzzle together, right? So if we can optimize on these areas, then we can better help our athletes without having to, I guess, completely deplete ourselves. Now, studies show that dehydration can reduce performance by up to 30%, and that can affect but by affecting fatigue, again, reaction time, attention to detail. So this sums it up in a way that we understand that if we can just improve, and again, progress over perfection, just improve our hydration game. Remember to bring our bottle. Remember to sip frequently, right? Instead of chugging it all at once. Maybe it's saying every time I look at the time, I'm going to have something to drink, or I will have a sip whenever I look at my phone. I've had athletes actually put on their phones, on their background, a picture of a water bottle. And so when they see that on their background, the first thing they think is, oh gosh, what's that picture on there for? Oh yeah, I've got to have a sip. So these are a way of establishing these routines. It might just be every time you eat, you have a sip between bites to slow you down, help you hydrate, help you absorb the nutrients, digest, but also really help you optimize on your performance. So, what I'm going to do is every time I take a sip, I'm going to challenge you all to take a sip as well of whatever you have to drink. So, cheers to Sport MB, to Manon, and to each and every one of you. So, quick hydration tips. We're going to check first morning urine. If we've got we go in the morning if we're looking at the water in the bowl. Not everybody's doing this. Sometimes the lights are off. Sometimes, in certain cases, uh, it's not as easy. Uh, Maybe you're not wanting to wake someone up, turn the light on or whatnot, but check first morning urine. We want it to be paler like lemonade. That's a sign of proper hydration after a long period of sleep. So if you're working shift work, that would be after your long period of sleep, regardless if that's in the night or in the day. Small sips of liquid often. If you don't have enough time to rehydrate, it can take a couple hours as we've mentioned. If it's inevitable or if you realize you're starting to get a headache or whatnot, something like the pharmacy sort of Pedialyte, Hydralyte. I'm not associated to any of the brands, but just the electrolyte rehydration formulas that you would recommend to someone who has the flu, for example, and you'd get from the pharmacy, especially the Pedialyte we tend to use with athletes as well. That can be useful for rehydrating us as coaching staff to properly help with performance. Again, carbohydrates for performance and carrying a water bottle can be other great tips and tricks. Now, if we're looking at fuel, this is just a quick reminder that not getting enough carbohydrates, again, can not only affect the hydration, but it can also reduce speed uh, in terms of performance while affecting focus, concentration, mood, and energy. So, if you've ever felt it before, and I know we've all been there, you might be there now, actually. If you're sitting and you're trying to concentrate and information's coming in, but you're just not absorbing it, or you're reading the same sentence over and it's just, you know, not registering. There could be other reasons for this as well, obviously, but these can be signs that you just don't have enough fuel for the brain at that moment. We tend to see this if someone's had, let's say, just a banana for snack or just a granola bar, or maybe it's an hour before lunch and you haven't eaten in 4 hours, and your gas tank, your fuel is starting to get low. So this is your main fuel source. Carbs are your main fuel source for the brain and for the muscles. And so what ends up happening is we're having a harder time with these different aspects of mental or cognitive performance. Sometimes it'll be fatigue. So if you've ever yawned at a moment where you're thinking, why am I yawning right now? Maybe you're practicing sport yourself and all of a sudden you yawn in the middle and you're thinking, why am I yawning at this moment, at this such an intense moment? I've had coaches laugh and say that they understand when all of a sudden they'll look at a player and think, gosh, why did you tie your shoes like that? Or, your cleats, just something that usually would not irritate them, and all of a sudden they're feeling more easily irritated. Those may be signs that you should look at the time and see when you last had your carb source. Okay, so these are all little ways that you can little things, little red flags that you should be looking for to make sure that you're properly fueled. So, the literature shows, research shows that in a healthy individual, carbohydrates are the main fuel source for the brain, and that the body actually needs about 110 grams, or the brain actually needs about 110 grams of carbs daily just to optimize brain function. Now, if we are not consuming enough carbohydrates for energy output and brain function, the body's going to use it for energy first, and that's where the brain's not going to have full uh, performance capacity. So it's about fueling yourselves to be able to help your athletes perform, but also to have energy left in the tank for your social life, for your family life, for whatever else you want to do, for your training, for your sports, and so on. So if I were to ask carbohydrate amounts here, number one, two, or three, just write down in the box which one you think you would need in terms of proper plate balance for a meal as a coach. So where do you see your needs? And there's no one good answer. I'm seeing a lot of twos coming up. Safe bet, number two. Or maybe you've all got more of the number two energy output. So I will explain what these plates represent. So number two tends to be, because it's what has been answered most, so I'll start with that. This is the plate where we are burning about an hour's worth of energy, maybe an hour and a half a day. These three plates are inspired by the US Olympic Committee athletes' plates. And so this is done by a lot of research. So we're calculating about zero point 0.3 grams of protein per kilo body weight for you as an individual. And then there's a more of a carb to protein ratio based on the energy output in the day. So number two is, we're burning a good hour of energy, whether that includes, I've got coaches who say, I'll have a run around lunchtime, then I'm coaching, then I'm lifting maybe, or I've got some triathlete coaches or coaches who I should say do triathlons. It doesn't mean they coach in that domain. Or they'll run marathons or they'll do other types of training. They ski on the weekend. So this would be about an hour of output and then maybe an hour and a half if we've got some of the lesser intensities. This would also be a balance plate, maybe if we are usually doing more intensities, but we're injured and we had to reduce training intensity. Now, the first plate, that is, as you can see, more of Canada's food guide. That does not apply to your athletes. 99% of athletes have too much muscle mass to be able to be fueled properly on that kind of plate. So we tend to be careful with that kind of plate. Some athletes might need it. Um, in certain situations, weight class athletes sometimes will need a lot less than that. But in general, if you're training less than an hour as a coach in the day, you're not putting out much energy and that you can feel properly fueled on that kind of plate, that could be an option as well. Now, the harder training plate number three, I did see a couple answers there. So this would be heavier training in the day. So about an hour and a half or more of higher intensity training. And so this would be a little bit more carbohydrate, more of a 3 or 4 times more carbs than protein. So we've got whole grains, we've got a variety of colors of fruit and vegetables and all these options. So you might vary from plate to plate throughout the day based on when your training is or from one day to the next, what type of plate you need. So we're always going to listen to our gut. We're never going to force feed. But as you can see here, and as I tend to see in most coaches, this does not represent the way most coaches divide their breakfast if they are having breakfast. Okay. We do want to be having breakfast first thing in the morning within the hour, but what I tend to see is maybe a couple pieces of toast, or some will do just eggs and sausage, or we might get sometimes a bowl of cereal. So we really want to aim for proper fueling. If we're looking at that zero point 0.3 grams per kilogram of protein, most of you are requiring a 20 to 35 grams of protein at your meals and snacks. And that part, the end snacks, that's what helps with energy stability. So again, instead of just having the banana, maybe we're having the banana on a protein tortilla that we can get at most grocery stores. In the normal tortilla section, there's pea protein or chickpea protein, or flour, I should say, pea flour, chickpea flour in that recipe. And you can have that as a coach. Put some peanut butter or wow butter on there. Wow butter is the soy version if you can't have nuts around certain athletes. You roll up your banana in there and you're set. You've got a balanced snack. Maybe for breakfast, if you're having cereal or granola, you'd want to have it with Greek yogurt and fruit. We might be having other combinations, such as instead of just the eggs, we might be having it with toast. We might be having a piece of fruit on the side. So I'm looking here at the question section. And Sam, I'm glad to hear you're following this tortilla already. You're following the tortilla trend. I believe Dempster's makes a bread that also has possible pea protein in there, so you can always check that out. Um, so a good breakfast. So we wouldn't necessarily need 110 grams of carbs right away. That's a very good question. Yes, the brain needs about 110 grams of carbs throughout the day, but the brain needs to function all day, right? So we don't want it only the carbs at breakfast because that will not be sustained throughout the day. This is why we want to make sure we're eating every few hours, maybe every 3 hours, with smaller amounts. So if right now you're having great big meals, maybe you're just having one meal a day, 2 meals a day, but they're big. Let's spread that meal out. Break that meal into two. Have half of the chicken, the fish, the beans, the protein, the Greek yogurt, maybe at noon, the other half at 3 p.m., half the granola at noon, the other half at 3 p.m., and same thing with the fruit in there. Even if you're having it that way, to just start eating more often as opposed to two large times where you can spike and crash, we want to make sure that the protein helps stabilize the energy so that it lasts longer. And then our mental performance and our problem solving skills and our trying to figure out how am I going to teach this differently because this athlete's not getting it. That capacity can be optimized if we're eating smaller amounts more often. Again, this is for the healthy individual. So some individuals, because of certain health conditions, may need to eat differently. That's a very good question as well in the chat box. We should not be waiting to feel very hungry. We've got to remember that sometimes certain symptoms can come up that are not necessarily the stomach gurgling or the stomach grumbling, but we may feel symptoms in other ways, like becoming irritable. Some may get headaches, especially if you've had concussions in the past. And I feel like we all have, but we may be from an era where they weren't necessarily as diagnosed as much, or you know, anybody born in the 80s or earlier. I know I it wasn't a thing. Uh, to diagnose a concussion where you didn't necessarily pass out or anything like that. And then in those cases, sometimes from what I'm seeing in practice is a lot of individuals will say they're not feeling the physical, tummy grumbling, but they're seeing their energy go down. They're getting headaches. They're becoming more irritable. They're having more trouble focusing. And so if at that time they just take a little snack, carbs and protein, and then they look in, they self-evaluate again, they can realize that that improves. So we're not talking about just adding extra food to your day, but just spreading it out better and tuning in with your body about every 3 hours. If 3 hours after your meal, you're thinking, oh gosh, I'm stuffed. I feel like that. I know after I've been to a restaurant, for example, then you don't want to force feed yourself. You're going to wait. But you might notice if you're always stuffed after lunch and you're the one who prepared lunch, maybe you need a smaller portion so that you can be hungry 3 hours later. Now, if the hunger still is very rarely there, we always want to check with certain markers, blood markers specifically, vitamin B12, iron, talk to your family physician, ask to have those tested. We want it to be mid-range at least because these, even the magnesium, we want it to be mid-range. If these are low, they can actually reduce your appetite quite significantly. Now, eating breakfast within the hour of waking in the morning can be uh, is encouraged and can be a really good way to start off with a good energy in the morning. It can also help reduce some of those cravings in the evening for food that you lacked earlier on in the day. So, examples of balanced snacks, I talked about a few of them, so I'm not going to go through all of them again, but they can be quick. I'm not asking you to spend an hour in the kitchen. I know your days are very uh, swamped with information and with schedules, very tight schedules. So, which I appreciate. And I have children who have coaches, and I appreciate absolutely everything they do. And I work with coaches, and I appreciate everything you all do. So, I definitely don't want to add more to your plate, if the pun intended. But I do want to make sure that you've got something that you can depend on. So sometimes it's even just a plan B option. Cliff Builder bar or Gatorade protein bar with maybe a fruit to go if, in your bag. And if you cannot get home to a meal when you were expecting to, if you're hungry and it's snack time and you didn't bring anything or you dropped your food or anything like that, then you don't have to deal with that performance drop and that energy drop and so on. So you've got a plan B. Now, if you know the ultra filtered milk, Fairlife, Nutrell Plus, Joya, Lactancia Plus, there's a lot of different types of milk that have been ultra filtered. There's more protein in each cup. So a cup or 8 ounces would have uh, about 18 grams of protein as opposed to 8 grams. Cooking your microwave oatmeal in that instead of water is a great way to just balance things out a little bit more. So we're not looking at something over the top. Rice bowl could be those packets of pre-cooked rice if you need to, if you're in a rush, a bag of salad, a rotisserie chicken that you just pull chicken off of and make that into a rice bowl. Okay. So we want to set reminders and timers. The reminder might just say, hey, did you have a snack? If you're used to only eating once a day, I've had coaches who told me that, and I appreciated the honesty. And, they were always looking out for everyone else. So they may just have reminders set for breakfast and lunch until their body gets used to telling them they're hungry at that time. Because when we're not eating, what ends up happening is called muscle wasting. So the body can eat away at your muscle and store fat when we go very long periods without eating. And we definitely don't want that to be happening. Okay. And that's why the body sometimes doesn't tell you it's hungry and gives up on telling you it's hungry, even if you go many, many hours without eating. So have an ongoing grocery list. That's another way, another practical tip, another way of staying on your toes. This means that if you eat the last, I don't know, apple, Then you put Apple on the grocery list. And this could be a shared list, whether that be shared notes on your phone with the rest of your family members. It could be a paper you have at the house. We've got a rule that you can't throw something out, can't throw out a container until you put it on the grocery list. So that makes things a lot easier because if you were to ask me, what do you need for groceries? It would take me a minute and I'd have to look in the fridge and try to imagine what's not there. So it's a lot easier when the things that we're buying regularly go back on the list as soon as they're no longer in the house or before we throw out the container. If you're not a breakfast person, if you have a hard time with eating in the morning, or maybe you've got a job that just doesn't allow you to eat while you work, then you can try maybe something like a smoothie that you've made with Greek yogurt, fruit, uh, in a mug, in a travel mug. So you're sipping at it. It's socially accepted at a work meeting, but you're still getting those nutrients in. Some will even add oats in there. We want to choose whole grains. Whole grains are going to stabilize that energy. Okay. It's going to help your energy stay focused for a long period of time because it's going to digest a little bit slower. So eating the small potatoes, eating the skins on them, or having whole grain bread, or maybe quinoa or the quinoa pasta. So there's a lot of options there as well. So we're going to have another sip. So again, every meal and snack we want to have carbs and protein. So the three parts of the plate, ideally. Now, you might not want to have fruit before bed. That's fine. I always get the question, what about eating after 8 p.m., right? Because I know we all used to hear you shouldn't eat after a certain time. And so what we need to remember is the body doesn't, it's not like a vehicle that you shut off. It still requires fuel after a certain hour. And so if you have an early supper, maybe something around 5, 6 o'clock, and you're only going to bed at 10, then it's absolutely normal to require a snack before bed. Maybe it could be something simple like um, the homemade muffin with maybe nuts and a bit of cheese. You might choose instead to have uh, crackers and cheese, or having, let's say, dry chickpeas with something to eat on the side of it, maybe with a bit of popcorn or whatever you're choosing to have at that time. So it doesn't have to be complicated. We don't want to have very high fat meals during work hours, and we're talking about coaching hours or around coaching hours, because they can make you feel like you want to fall asleep. They can make you feel like you've had a turkey dinner. So if we troubleshoot, you've got an energy crash, you're feeling irritable. Possible nutrition reasons. Now, I'm saying possible because there can be a lot of other reasons. And, sports psychology or performance psychology falls into place. Um, Sometimes the nutrition aspect, if you don't have enough carbs for your brain to be able to apply what the performance psychologist has taught your athletes and taught you, then fueling your brain could be one of the first steps to being able to properly process and remember what your performance psychologist taught you and apply those things. So there's a lot of different reasons where you would have an energy crash or irritability. But the top two nutrition reasons would be not enough carbs to fuel the brain or dehydration. So possible solutions, if anyone wants to write some in the chat box, you're feeling an energy crash, you're feeling irritable in the moment. What can we do in that moment to try to rectify, to try to troubleshoot? Oops. So I'm going to go over to, oh, All right, I was just gonna start asking some of you. I was looking for that button to see where everyone was. So, having a snack, definitely. If you do not have diabetes, pre-diabetes, anything of the sort, then the quickest way to have that snack would actually be to have the carbohydrate first, and then 10 minutes later, have the protein. So the carbohydrate is going to increase. Yes, simple sugar. Someone just wrote it down. The carbohydrate will increase the fuel to your brain a lot quicker, and then the protein will help keep it stable. Preferably throughout the day, we're having them together, but if you are already crashed, then we might have, let's say, the apple, and then you add the cheese 10 minutes later. Water is a great option. Water with electrolytes. So, yes, something like those little packets, like I said, Pedialyte or even something salty, salty snack like a pretzel for your carb, and then maybe water to drink and some sort of protein with it, like nuts. So these are all absolutely fantastic options. And again, before adding salt or the electrolytes, you want to make sure that there's no health issues, okay? Now, the next one, headaches. Main reason could be dehydration. If you are a coach who tends to sweat a lot, training on your own outside of coaching, it could be low sodium. If you've sweat quite a bit during your own training and maybe you didn't replace that salt properly, which is also linked in with dehydration. Low carb availability can cause headaches in some, where they'll feel a headache come on instead of feeling hungry sometimes. A comment in the chat box. I love it. I bought LMNT electrolytes. It's like drinking the ocean. I absolutely love LMNT. I enjoy it. I think it has a good flavor combination with the salt, whereas some of the other ones, I wonder sometimes why they put a certain flavor with salt because it doesn't combine well with certain other brands that I've had. It is very high. It's about 1,000 milligrams of sodium per packet. Um, yeah, I myself very much enjoy, but I know that some people feel that they've got to dilute it because they're not huge fans of that salty taste. So I really enjoy that comment. So in this case, possible solutions are going to be a lot of the same as what you named for the irritability and the energy crashes. Okay. Uh, because dehydration tends to be one of the main ones, we might go with a rehydration electrolyte mix, a pharmacy one or one that we that is tested and trusted, we'll say, with for our athletes. We don't have to use the whole amount either. Same goes with the LMNT. Now, if someone has what they describe as brain fog, okay, or fatigue, brain fog, I've asked, it's been described a lot to me by athletes and coaches throughout the years, and they all describe it as being sort of having trouble concentrating and focusing and kind of being a bit hazy with their productivity of their brain at the moment. So, still the same possible nutrition reasons, still the same possible solutions. Okay, so again, we want to just try and remember that eating the balance of carbs and protein, eating frequently small amounts. Same thing with our hydration. Hydrating regularly, hydrating in small amounts. Now, what about caffeine? So, I know at least one of you never leave the house without caffeine. And I know who that is. So, what we want to do is we want to make sure that when we're having caffeine, we're not overdoing the dose. Now, athletes can easily do this when they're consuming something like a pre-workout that we want to avoid. Um, if you're having coffee, let's say Tim Hortons medium, Tim Hortons large, that would end up being representing the average weight-ish. So 3 milligrams per kilo body weight tends to be about, 200 milligrams of caffeine for about a 4 to 6 hour period. Now, this might be you may be choosing to have tea instead, which has less caffeine. You might be having Um, Gosh, I'm forgetting the English word here. I'll think about it later. The priority is that we not overdo it. So if we're having excessive amounts of caffeine, and what caffeine does is it shuts off certain fatigue receptors in your brain and in your muscles for a specific period of time. Now, if that fatigue comes back all at once, you definitely don't want that happening in the middle of coaching a very important game, tournament, or whatnot, because that fatigue is going to hit hard. So we want to time it properly. Okay. We also don't want to have excessive amounts because that can affect cardiac rhythm, especially if we're already feeling the adrenaline of a big competition that we're coaching. It can cause more anxiety. It can also affect sleep depth. So, as much as I've heard individuals say, and I've said it myself before too, that I can sleep even if I've had coffee, we've got to be careful with how well we're sleeping. So, the sleep depth. So, caffeine dependence, if you feel like you're having six coffee a day and you need it to survive, we've got to wonder, why is this the case? Okay, I want you to dig in deeper. Is it that I'm not eating often enough? Am I not getting the right carb to protein ratio? Maybe you're getting a whole lot of protein because everybody's talking about the importance of protein. Maybe you're not getting enough carbohydrate. There's not enough fuel. So your gas light is on in your car, your vehicle, which is your body, and you're just putting masking tape over it instead of putting gas in the tank. Maybe it's dehydration. It could be an iron or B12 deficiency. It could be sleep problems or sleep quality, sleep quantity as well. So we want to make sure to dig in deep. Okay, we want to figure out, why is this happening? So the last part I want to share with you is sleep and recovery. So recovery for you as a coach, um, because we need to have you fresh in the morning. We need to make sure that you're able to give the best of yourself. So we're talking here about the nutrition implications of sleep. I'm not a sleep specialist, but I'm going to talk about the nutrition side of things. So number one is we don't want to go to bed hungry. If you're going to bed hungry, you are not going to reach a quality sleep. We also want to make sure that we're not going to the other extreme where we're eating until we're so chock full that we are having an inability to follow the proper sleep patterns, or we're having even reflux at night because we've eaten so much right before bed. Sometimes those cravings are because of not eating enough earlier on in the day, and then the body says, "Whoa, I need to catch up." And that's when we have cravings for some of these things. Uh, so we want to eat until we're satisfied, not until we're full. And that's a lot easier to do when we're sleeping properly, but also when we're eating often, as opposed to when we're starving, because that's when our body's going to tell us to just fill our tank. Now, we want to have more carbs than protein at evening snack if we are healthy, if there's no medical reason for us not to do so. So, this can actually help our bodies produce melatonin, a natural melatonin, which our body does produce. Being in the dark, not having a light on in the room while we're sleeping, having the room at a cooler temperature. These are all things that help our bodies produce its natural melatonin. Another one of them is making sure that that snack, maybe an hour or two before bed, has more carbs than protein in order to help us produce the melatonin. So that could be very useful. It could be as simple as having, let's say, toast and peanut butter, as opposed to having just a protein shake before bed, which again, I've heard many people say that they've had it. Alcohol and THC near bedtime. Now, we know that these are not illegal. The THC, the alcohol hasn't been has been legal for a long time, but what ends up happening here is we've got a lot of individuals who say, I've got a lot on my mind, I've got a lot of stress. A glass of wine or a couple gummies helps me fall asleep. It may help you fall asleep, but what the research is showing is that the depth of sleep and the quality of sleep can become affected in that case. So there are better things to do and better ways to improve the sleep. Caffeine as well. at least 6 hours. For some individuals, it's up to 12 hours before bed that they cannot have caffeine. So, listen to your body, but play around with these things to see what's going on. Now, sometimes when we have the opportunity to look at blood work, when I'm pulling up a client's blood work, what I'll see is a vitamin D deficiency. And vitamin D comes from the UVB rays of the sun. This will help um, with our reduced inflammation capacity. If we have enough vitamin D, it helps reduce risk of illness. If we have sufficient vitamin D. So we're not saying that vitamin D is going to help with improving all these things necessarily. It is possible to get too much. However, this is something we should be supplementing with regularly because we have winters and it comes from the UVB rays of the sun. So, vitamin D deficiency research shows is linked to a decreased ability for quality sleep. So, waking up and not feeling rested. So this is something we want to look into. And if you are already taking a vitamin D supplement, Jameson is the pharmaceutical brand that we generally recommend to our athletes who get tested. It's a brand that we can trust, but we want to make sure that it is consumed with a source of fat. Vitamin D is liposoluble. It's absorbed in the fat that with the fat. So if you're having peanut butter, if you're having avocado or salad dressing. So it's not just waking up in the morning and having vitamin D on an empty stomach or with a cup of coffee, but it's really having it with maybe nuts or something of the sort during the day in order to absorb it. Some symptoms of magnesium deficiency include fatigue. It includes reduced sleep quality and quantity. It even includes, for some, muscle cramps at rest. So, a cramp in your foot or in your calf, even when you're in bed. So, if you have some of these, we definitely don't want you to just self supplement. You want to see your physician, ask to get some blood work done. Make sure, ask your physician if you're mid-range for the magnesium amounts. Athletes, for those of you who still practice sports while coaching, athletes lose up to 20% more magnesium through sweat and urine. The urine can be up to 24 hours after training. And so there's higher magnesium deficiency risks there. Now, one of the reasons we want to make sure that we are checking first is that we don't want you to end up taking the wrong magnesium or the wrong dose. Some magnesium supplements help with acting as a laxative. Some other ones can help with sleep and muscle relaxation. Other ones can actually help keep you alert and awake. And so we really want to make sure you're taking the right type at the right time and in the right dose. I want you to come back to that page that we filled out at the very start of this session, okay? You wrote down which nutrition behaviors or actions that you thought you should be prioritizing to optimize your performance and your sleep as a coach. So now that we've gone through the session, I want you to, I guess, adjust or reassess. So, is everything you wrote down right? Is there something you want to write down underneath as to how you're going to do that? This is sort of a contract with yourself. So you'll have access to this recording, but if you want to remember what you got from it and what you want to change, and you're not going to change it all at once. So if you've got notes of, hey, I want to change these 3 items, then you can start with 1 item a week. Again, progress over perfection. So go ahead. I'm going to give you a minute. Write down which nutrition actions or behaviors you should prioritize. Fix that document, add some stuff in, cross some stuff off. When you're done, have a little sip of liquid so that I can know that you're done.
Sorry, Natasha, I missed that one. I came in a little late
No
because I was
worries,
getting
Sam.
off
I'm
the
just happy to
ice.
have you here. How are you?
Um, Good. I'm happy to be here. I
Good.
love your presentations all the time. It's so knowledgeable. So,
Much appreciated. Much
yeah.
appreciated. Well, maybe you can share, Sam. Is there something from when you jumped on the call? Is there something in particular that stuck out to you and that you will maybe try and do differently with your
To me,
nutrition?
it was finding out when my crash is coming without really paying attention to it, and
Oh,
then realizing, okay, it's coming, but I'm like, I don't got time. I'll just push a little bit more, push a little bit more, and then realizing I'm over that hill. I'm done now. I should have did it before. So I think it's just self-conscious to make sure that I don't go over that hill to be burnt out or
I like
overtired. Yeah.
that's very self-aware and it's the hardest thing to do, right? Is to take care of yourself when you're trying to take do 1,001 other things.
Yeah. On top of that, I'm going to reach out to you because I want you to come and do a presentation for association.
Oh,
And
awesome.
yeah, I like to have
Happy to
some of
help.
the kids basically like we did before, basically get the kids involved and the parents also to see exactly what we should eat, what we shouldn't. And yeah, so I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Always great to have the parents involved because they are the ones
Yeah,
running the ship when it comes to nutrition. So we can teach the athletes all we want, but if they're not the ones cooking, we need to be
correct.
talking to the cooks and the grocery shoppers.
Correct.
Now, for those of you who are still writing, go ahead and do it. I've seen a couple of you have a sip of liquid, so I'm happy to see that you finished your notes. Now, just to sum it up again, it is important that we focus on optimizing on our cognitive performance as coaches, okay? So that we can better help others. It's that whole put your mask on in the airplane before putting somebody else's mask on, right? You want to be able to take care of yourself so that you can take care of everyone else, which is what you've always been doing, but we need the energy to be there so you're not burning yourselves out. Now, we also want to remember the troubleshooting, carbs and protein, especially getting the carbs in and having it stay stable, and then hydration. These are the two main reasons for having a lot of the symptoms that are nutrition related. And again, if we can improve that sleep, if we can get an extra half hour of sleep or get more quality sleep or fall asleep quicker or just wake up feeling more rested, then that's half the battle. So I am going to take questions if there are any. I know I've gone over on time a little bit. My apologies for that. Mana, do you have any questions that come to mind?
I don't, but Kristen has one in the chat.
Oh,
Her question is, what type of electrolytes do you recommend?
ooh. So that all depends on the individual, the sport, uh, their blood pressure. So I'm going to give general guidelines for each of these categories. If we are on the lower end of sweating, and if we are, or on the higher end of blood pressure, then we're definitely not going to go for something that's too high in sodium. Maybe something like the white box Pedialyte, something like that. Now, the more the sweat rates are high or the lower the blood pressure, the more we need to get sodium in there. And sodium is the variable that is going to change from one electrolyte to the next. So if we're looking at heavy sweating sports or individuals who have naturally low blood pressure and who get symptoms from it, then we need to make sure that we're going into sometimes the 700 milligrams of sodium per 500 mil, all the way up to 1,000 milligrams of sodium per 500 mil. So there's not necessarily an ideal one brand, the LMNT I love, for example, but you could do the Gatorade or the Powerade and even add a couple pinches of table salt into it. So we've seen teams where the team will buy one brand like the Gatorade or the Powerade and individuals will add salt according to what they need. So for you as coaches, you might not need what they need, but you can adapt according to what your requirements are. I've seen BioSteel mentioned. That is a low sodium amount. So if it's a sport where there's very little sweat and we're looking more at just, as a hydrator in general, but if we are having high sweat volumes, you may need to add a little bit of table salt to that. So this is what we need to be aware of. Now, too much caffeine. Yes, a question here about caffeine. If we're having too much caffeine, it can interfere with sleep quality, sleep quantity. It can affect technical skills, and it can also affect the ability to focus. Sometimes in some individuals, we'll see it more with people who have ADHD, it will help them focus sometimes. But in other individuals, it could even give them heart palpitations, diarrhea, anxiety. So there's a lot of different symptoms that can come from that. And we want to be very aware that depending on the stress level, if you're at a big competition, a big tournament, a big game where there's already an adrenaline component, it can take less caffeine than usual to make you feel really off. And we definitely don't want that to happen. So we want to test out these amounts ahead of time and we want to sit on the lower end of what makes us feel okay without going to an extreme. So tag teaming the carbs with the protein in our snacks. How many grams of protein for the snack? Especially if you're eating every 3 hours. So beautiful. It's actually the same amount of protein for meals and snacks if we're looking at really getting that balance in and we're healthy and we don't have any health issues that are causing us to need different amounts. So about 20 to 30, depending on the size of the individual, right? A 5 foot, 110 pound person will not have the same needs as a 6'3" 230 pound person. So a 20 to 30 grams of protein, and then we would get carbohydrates. For the protein bars that you mentioned, the reason we tend to go with the Cliff Builder protein bar, the Gatorade protein bars, these are brands that we tend to be able to trust a bit more. We want to be careful if we're just grabbing any protein bar because number one, if the protein is not from a trusted, reputable source, the protein powder that's in it, there may not be the amounts of protein that are recommended. It may cause doping risk if we're looking at giving it to our athletes. And again, our athletes are always watching us, right? We are sort of the examples and we're leading by example. So if they're saying, oh, well, coach is having this, we should maybe have it too. So it's good to have things that they can also be consuming if they're watching us consume that protein bar. The other thing is some of the protein bars might have artificial sweeteners that are called sugar alcohols. The body does not digest those well, and a lot of people will get diarrhea from those. We have to subtract the sugar alcohols and the fiber from the overall carb content, and it often leaves us with very little carbs in that protein bar. Thoughts on carbohydrate supplements? Yes, so carbohydrate supplements can work for a quick carb. That being said, I always encourage athletes to focus on real food first. The reason real food first is so important is that there's a lot of nutritional value to the real food. Now, if we're traveling and it's just that much easier to bring a carb powder that we know is, has been certified NSF Sport, Informed Sport, or has a reduced risk of doping because of that certification, then that's one thing. But if we're at home and we have access, let's say, to maple syrup, which has, or honey that has a 15 grams of carbs per tablespoon, or orange juice or apple juice that has 15 grams of carbs per 4 ounces or half a cup. This is a fantastic way to get carbohydrates in without just filling up on empty calories and it helps the overall intake. Now, I'm not saying that I don't use some carb supplements with some of my athletes, especially when we don't have access to real food or we're traveling or so on. But like I said, real food first is generally recommended because we want the antioxidants and the nutritional value, vitamins, minerals that we will get from the real food. So I want to thank each and every single one of you for taking time out of your crazy busy schedules And I truly hope you felt that this was a valuable use of your time. Um, each and every one of you are so useful to our community or sports community as a whole, and I really appreciate everything that you do for the sports community. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Manon, for hosting this, for organizing this. I very much am honored to be a part of it. And should any of you have any questions that come up later on, feel free to send me a message, reach out, whether that be a text, a message through social media, a message, an email, whatever that may be. I'm here to support you. So thank you again and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Merci, Natasha. In the chat, I'm just going to put we have two podium performance coming up. One, of course, is with Laura Watson on building your personal yearly training plan. She actually works for Own the Podium. So it's happening on January 28th at 12:30. That's lunchtime space. Again, it'll be recorded, so we will have an opportunity there. And the French session that we will host with Natasha on February 24th. So tell your friends. Cheers, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.